Buongiorno e
Good
benvenuti
morning and welcome to all of you to this online webinar. The title is Gap Museums and the Gender Equality Global Trend, organized by the Museo Marino Marini in Florence and dedicated to the topic of gender inequality in arts and culture in particular. I would like to welcome our speakers, our guests, and they are with us at this round table. I would like to greet Patrizia Asproni, President of the Foundation Marini San Pancrazio. Good evening. Thank you for being here. I would like to greet Mrs. Fatma Nightingale, Director of the National Bardo Museum in Tunisia and Visiting Director Museum Marino Marini in Florence.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody.
Introduco anche la presenza.
And now I would like to introduce Dimitri OZERKOV, Director of Contemporary Art Department of the State Hermitage Museum at St. Petersburg. Good afternoon. Good afternoon on my side. Good afternoon. Thank you, Professor, and welcome to Mariella Mengozzi, Director of the National Museum of the Automobiles, Automotive in Turin. Good morning. I'm glad to be here with you to talk about this important topic. We also have Christopher Bedford, Director of the Baltimore Museum of Art, and it's a good morning for him because he is live from Baltimore. Good morning.
Good morning. Pleasure to be here.
E buongiorno anche a Danilo Ecker.
And good afternoon, good morning to Danilo Ecke, art critic, professor, and Italian curator participating in this event. Good afternoon. Now, I would like to give the floor to Mrs. Asproni with a provocation. Is it president, presidente or presidentessa? In Italian, it changes if you are a man or a woman. So thank you. Chiara, thank you to all the speakers for accepting our invitation, and I'm glad to see their passion, their enthusiasm, because I think it's a common, a shared topic. I think presidenta, so presidente is a neutral, presidentessa, tessa, so the female form, well, presidenta, it's the correct linguistic choice, I think, in Italian. I would like to start my speech by quoting Bob Dylan, 1964. Times are changing, said Bob Dylan, but the times are the change. And I like this quotation very much because today, as it used to be, we are living a great change, something afraid maybe, but also very exciting. And it opens up many possibilities, and women are at the core of this change. Researchers say data, figures and data are not lying. They are taking a picture of a changing world, something that is dematerialized, a world that is digital. Women are confirming their presence, not only by, following this change, but also by creating change. We can see it in our field, culture, art, and they are graduating at university, and women are embracing the STEM and humanities, which is a very interesting binomial and it, something which is a game changer. And they are now progressing and covering several roles, but it's a pathway filled with obstacles, with discriminations, but it's a pathway that we are following. art, museum, there are civic spaces of responsibility and social inclusion will be among the most important players of this change and this new presence that today is becoming more and more visible. The artists from the past are now coming out from the damnatio memoria because they were condemned to forgetful, while the current artists are now speaking up, and the women artists, women curators, women architects, directors, the main players of the art industry. Women have always been proactive actresses, a source of inspiration, but also protagonists, even when they worked in the backstage. For example, the Museo Marino Marini was created by the will of a woman, the wife of the artist Marini. And Uffizi, the Museum Uffizi, was wanted by Maria de' Medici, and she wanted to leave all the extraordinary heritage to the Florence citizens, to the world. So one of the most important museums of the world today exists thanks to a woman. And the Contemporary Art Museum of Florence is there thanks to a woman. So museums can and must be a proactive part of this change. We have many guests today with us who are already conducting these changes in their own area, and museums that can be considered as a real, oasis, something that is still inside a hurricane, inside something that is changing. So we had to question ourselves and the others to find the proper answers for this change. That's why that Museo Marino Marini is working in the first line to give voice to many women artists. So I would like to thank Fatma because she accepted the role of visiting director for the Museo Marino Marini in a very difficult year. And women, we don't know why they always have to tackle, the great challenges and the great difficulties. That they always accept these challenges. And that's why we decided to organize this event, to put together men and women, to listen to all the voices, because we are all the change. And Chiara, to you the floor once again. Thank you, Patrizia. Since you are working together to the project of the Museo Marino Marini, I would like to give the floor to Fatma by reminding that this dialogue between past and present, Fatma is specialized in ancient history, archaeology, with a specific specialization that is linked to the study of sports and the iconography of Olympic game, of athletic games, of sports, men and women. And she's also professor at the human sciences in Tunis, and she's also in charge of the Secretary of ICOM in Tunis. And she is the director of the National Bardo Museum in Tunis. And as Patrizia was saying before, she is today playing the role of visiting director of the Museo Marino Marini in Florence, with a fascinating program linked to women and to the Mediterranean players and roles. And unfortunately, due to this COVID crisis and the lockdown, it was not possible to conclude this project properly. But this Dido is the main figure, the main role, female myth that is very significant, because all the men who belong to this study program, traveled around this role of a woman, of a queen. So I wanted to ask Fatma, how strong is this topic of equality, gender equality on the other side of the Mediterranean Sea?
First of all, thank you. It is an honor. It is a huge pleasure for me to participate to this event with many participants coming from the world of museums, and that will be rich of ideas, concepts, and new visions that will give more value and more motivation to the role of women in this beautiful world, and this world which is artistic. I am a woman, you know, and I know those values very well. And so, together with Patrizia, since the very beginning, we really got on very well, and we agreed that women should be our main focus of our artistic collaboration. Then, due to the COVID and the lockdown, all the projects were not made, but nonetheless, we identified some lists. Anyway, can I share the PowerPoint? Because I have some. Can you see the PowerPoint? We can't.
Non ancora.
Not yet.
Riproviamo.
Alors, j'appuie sur écran partagé et puis.
So I click on share screen and then what?
Dovrebbe comparire la schermata.
No, il faut que vous activez le partage d'écran.
So you need to click on share screen, I think, she says.
Est-ce que vous pouvez dire aux techniciens donc d'activer le partage d'écran?
Could the technician please? Yes.
Voilà. C'est bon? Vous le voyez?
Sì, oui.
Alors, je parlerai donc du rôle dominant de la femme au musée.
I'm going to talk about the dominating role of leading role of women at the Bardo National Museum, and this is not based on the number, which is about 47 on a total of 110, and so 73 for men, but on the workload and on the great administrative and scientific responsibility of women in the management and in the preservation of the different collections at the National Bardo Museum. In fact, the National Bardo Museum is also a scientific institution that depends from the National Heritage Institute, and it is constituted by several departments, chronological and scientific, that are like that. We can list them like that. So prehistory department, Libyan or Numidian and Punic department, Roman Christian Byzantine department, Judaical department, and Islamic department. And these departments are managed, run by women who are specialists in the different periods. They manage those departments according to their academic skills. Each of them is the leader of a small team that makes inventory, classifications, conservation, restoration, and scientific studies and analysis. I will move to the scenography department. This department is also managed by a woman. So, as you can see in this picture, and this is both for permanent exhibitions in different rooms, but also for temporary or exhibitions. And the same is true for the Cultural Mediation Service and for the Education and Pedagogical Animation Service that are also led by women. We have also 2 women who are responsible for the research library and for the photo library, and also all the window maintenance of the different rooms of the museum. I left the most important workshop of this museum at the end. That is the preservation and restoration of mosaic, which is also managed by a brave woman who is carrying out a great job, a great activity of restoration and displaying solutions for many mosaics. And some of them are real treasures that have outstanding quality. And her team is composed only by men. The one you are seeing now. I would also add that the self-security or self-safety team is composed by many men and 2 women, and only one of them is responsible, that is myself. But all of that doesn't underestimate the important role of my male partners, and I'm very proud and happy to work with them, and I'm very happy to see that they are very active in all the fields. But the strange thing is that the maintenance team, which is composed by 12 women, is managed by a man. These women who are researchers, archaeologists, curators, conservators, they are also responsible for the different university workshops. And you know, I would like to point out that we work in an environment characterized by respect and by collaboration between the 2 sexes, men and women. Women nowadays are really taking on their responsibility, and nowadays the museums require many professional profiles, many different skills and know-how, and both in the backstage and in the front office. So the specialization in the different aspects of museography is more acquired by women, not only at the National Museum of Bardo, but also in all the other regional and local museums in Tunisia, and also in the workshop of conservation and restoration of all the heritage and the national reserves of ethnographic property in Ktsar Said. That is a royal palace 300 meters from the National Museums of Bardo. So apart from the scientific aspects, the National Museum of Bardo is also equipped with 3 Tunisian craftsman workshops, and the managers and the creators are women. So I would like to thank you for your attention, and long live Tunisian women, long live Italian women, and long live Mediterranean women. Thank you for your attention.
Grazie mille a Fatma, e devo dire che
Thank you, Fatma. And she showed a perfect balance model. So thank you for your speech, and we hope we can fly to Tunis so that you can visit the museum. So thank you, Fatma. Now I would like to give the floor to Dimitri OZERKOV, Director of Contemporary Art Department of the State Hermitage Museum, which is the result of an ambitious project where Hermitage opens up its collections and history to contemporary art sector of research, and it will include also some important extraordinary acquisitions. Dimitri was the first visiting director of the Museum Marino Marini in Florence, if I'm correct, and he will work directly on this selection, so I would like to ask him which artists are included in its list, what are the artists considered by St. Petersburg, and if we will talk about rediscovering historic artists or new artists. Thank you. I don't know if I take the floor in Italian or in English, but I haven't been traveling to Italy for a long time, so I'm a little bit rusty. Can I speak English? And we will use the translation.
Okay, so I will talk to English because now it's easier. Bene. So basically the State Hermitage Museum that celebrated 250 years recently was created by the will of one woman, Catherine the Great, who was the Russian Tsarine, who basically built the museum. She decided to create an institution that would be a parallel to the Rome. She wanted to have a Vatican on the borders of Neva, of the main river of St. Petersburg, the new capital. And she basically decided to build a palace that would have copies of the main room of Vatican, will have collections from all over the world. And she was a passionate collector. For the 33 years of her reign, she managed to collect many huge collections from all over the world. It's Lord Walpole collection from England. It was Count of Brühl collection from Saxony. It was Tronstein collection from Paris, and so on and so on and so on. Light brown collection of marbles. And she ended up in creating a huge storage of incredible artifacts that she turned into the museum. And she was calling it my Hermitage, using this French word by saying that is the place where I can hide. She would, as a reign, she would, as a Tsarina, she would do every day a long work to make the country live. She would direct wars, she would develop territories, she would deal with reforms inside the country, but her heart was with her collection of paintings, sculptures, and so on. So the whole history of the museum is based on her will of bringing proper art here to Russia. Now the Hermitage is one of the richest world museums, and we have 3.1 million of objects in the collection, of which about 17,000 there are paintings, and the rest we have about, you know, lots of numismatics, drawings, sculptures, and so on and so on. So initially she was like the first ideologist of the museum, and maybe the first director in a way, de facto. But then there were no women directors in the museum, and all the directors, like real directors in the position to direct the museum, were all men. And it's a question whether there will be women to direct this museum. But there are lots of people, lots of women working in the museums. There are a lot of curators, people who are doing different kind of job. I can't say the percentage of women in the museum, but they definitely more than 50%. And our staff is 2,500 people, more or less, and I'm sure that's more than 1,500 that are women. In Russia, we don't have a special division of gender. These problematics have not yet arrived to us in full. Of course, we have the inheritance from the Soviet times when men and women were all together working for the big country, for creating something new without any difference. And I think in a way this remains. But many women in art created incredible things over the last time. And now I can say that the art attracts a lot of young generation, girls and women. I'm directing several, I'm having several positions here in Russia, and I started to recount how many girls I have in the classrooms every time in the university or in the Hermitage or in my lectures. And most of them are girls. Normally, when I see a man in an audience, this looks an event, because normally all the classes are being attended mostly by girls. Probably it's my problem, but basically there are mostly girls. And we also have I have a small department of contemporary art in the Hermitage. This department was built in 2007 as a project for contemporary art called Hermitage 2021. The idea is to bring 20th and 21st century to the museum, because after the revolution of October 1917, we didn't have proper connection with the Western art. So the idea of this project is to bring in artists, subjects of Western art and art of the rest of the world. And in our team, we used to have only girls. And I was even accused in the museum a couple of years ago that my team is only girls. So I have 7 girls in the team. So when I got a vacancy, I decided to invite one man, simply not to get this disbalance. And so now I'm happy to have in my team one man, and all the accusations are off. But of course, this man is very happy because he's surrounded by beautiful and clever girls that really make his life very, very happy. We managed to create large and important projects, and we did an exhibition by biggest living artists now, like Anselm Kiefer, Jan Faber. We did lots of British artists like Tony Craig, and so on and so on. We also have group exhibitions. We have photographic exhibition. We make exhibitions on architecture. And I was trying to think whether we did some exhibition of female artists, and there were really few in this 12 years of activity. We did one photographer, a Russian photographer who was photographing Egypt, Cairo, and other cities, Ksenia, and she was basically, you know, one of small solo shows. But we never did a big solo show of a female artist. So that is the next step for us, and we're really looking for some very important female artists to work with us. There are several proposals in my table already. I'm not in the position to announce them now, but we're working hard on this, and I'm sure this exhibition disbalance will be properly corrected in next couple of years. So here we are.
Grazie Dimitri, non ci regala qualche anteprima?
Thank you, Dimitri. Can you tell us just a few names, some, you know, preview?
We still are working on this, frankly, because it's still the very beginning. We had some ideas, but you know, now the situation is so unstable. So unfortunately.
Ancora una domanda. Ma sono artiste...
Another question. Were historic artists of the 20th century, or even emerging new artists, so that you can play the role of talent scout?
We always invite living artists to do something specially for us, in term of like when we invited Anselm Kiefer, we initially wanted to do a retrospective of his work, but then we decided it would be much better if we create, if we show totally new series of work, and it becomes a world premiere of the new series of artistic work. So that we always propose to the artists whom we invite to create something new, something specially for us. And of course, the position of one of world's largest museums help us to be persistent. So of course, for the ladies, it will be basically the same story, and that's what we're working on right now.
Grazie. Io ricordo che tra l'altro a Milano è stata...
Thank you, and I would like to remind that in Milan it was closed due to the lockdown, a beautiful exhibition, an exhibition dedicated to the women of the Russian avant-garde. So we just visited at the beginning, but it was then closed due to COVID situation. So we hope we can be back to the exhibition. Now, next guest is Christopher Bedford, so welcome. Director of the Baltimore Museum of Art. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning.
Director, good morning.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a great pleasure. So I speak very fast. So I've been instructed to speak a little more slowly in order to aid and abet the translation. So I'll do my very best. So I'm speaking to you from Baltimore, obviously. The museum is unfortunately currently closed, which means that approximately 14 exhibitions committed to the work of female identifying artists are not on view at the moment. But I wanted to give the group a little bit of background on the BMA, what we've been historically, what we're attempting to do, what in the future, and what the work that we've done towards that in the last 4 years. So I'll say we are over a century old as an institution. We are home to about 96,000 objects. The collection is encyclopedic. It's very particularly heavy in works on paper. So 65,000 of our roughly 96,000 objects are works on paper. And we're capable within that of narrating a comprehensive history of Western art from the late 15th century to the present. I think we are distinguished by a number of collecting areas, but probably most famously by the Cone collection, given in 1949 by the Cone sisters to Baltimore. So that made us the biggest repository of Henri Matisse's work in any public institution anywhere in the world. So we went from being a merely great museum to a world-class museum in a nanosecond. And I mention that because the Cone sisters are among the great female leaders that transformed the institution. So at that time, Adeline Breeskin was the director of the BMA. In my view, she's the most significant director in the museum's history for two reasons. One is that she lured the Cone sisters away from the Museum of Modern Art and the promise of giving the gift of their collection there, and instead convinced the sisters to give it to their home city of Baltimore. And also she was the commissioner for the 1960 Venice Biennale, and it was one of the last group exhibitions in the American Pavilion at that point, and she presented an exhibition of abstract expressionism. Interestingly, no female artists were involved in that show. So we are an institution that was built through the leadership of women and built through the philanthropy of women as well. But rather unsurprisingly, when we went through the process of doing some collection analysis, we realized that two things, or an exhibition history too. The collection is less than 4% comprised of female identifying artists, and never in the history, over a century of history at the BMA, had we committed an exhibition to a female artist and produced an accompanying catalog. That had never happened. So as you all know, 2020, or some of you may know, 2020 is the centennial of women's suffrage in the United States. And not all women were granted the right to vote. 100 years ago, white women were granted the right to vote. So in recognition of that, we decided to commit every exhibition, every acquisition, and every public program across the entire museum for calendar year 20 to female identifying artists. So the consequence of that is that we will spend roughly $2.53 million on acquisitions spanning all of our collecting areas. Had I been able to use images here, I would have shown you pictures of some of those works that we've already brought into the collection. So that's been exhilarating. We are mounting a total of 23 exhibitions, again, spanning all of our collecting areas, all of our disciplinary areas. And the focus is deliberately very global. So ranging from Katerina Grosser, who's a Berlin-based extraordinary abstract painter, to the deceased abstract expressionist master, Joan Mitchell. We will be opening her first ever comprehensive retrospective that we're co-organizing with SF MoMA in the late spring of next year. So I think that's enormously notable too. I don't know how many retrospective exhibitions Mark Rothko, Franz Klein, and Jackson Pollock have received since their respective deaths. But the fact that Joan Mitchell, who in the eyes of many is one of the great American painters alongside de Kooning, has never received a comprehensive retrospective, and there is no comprehensive catalog of her work, I think is highly indicative of the prejudice that has structured particularly the study of the post-war period. We have on view at the moment, unfortunately we're not open, but on view in the museum at the moment is an exhibition called A Perfect Power, which looks at matrilineal structures in continental Africa through the matrilineal belt. So in that case, every object in the show is made by a male maker, but everyone represents a woman and female power. So it's an interesting analysis of what constitutes a feminism in continental Africa. But there are very few female makers, as anybody on the call who has any expertise in African art knows. Beadwork certainly, but women do not carve wood in continental Africa, so it would be impossible to do a show centering female makers. Our entire West Wing at the moment is committed to female identifying artists. We have two big painting shows opening in the spring, one by the American painter Lisa Yuskavich, and another by Shabalala Self. So it's been an extraordinary period of time. COVID has, of course, interrupted our efforts, but we committed not to reschedule or cancel any exhibitions. So what was going to be a circumscribed 2020 initiative at the museum is now bleeding all the way into November of 2021, as is our accompanying public programs and also our acquisitions. So it's a very totalizing effort. It was, as some of you know, met with a mixture of celebration and adulation and some right-leaning criticism in this country. It was one of the biggest announcements the museum's ever made. And I found it fascinating that it went beyond the art world and into the world of mainstream journalism. There was great television and mainstream media interest in this decision. With a lot of, again, right-leaning criticism suggesting that what we were doing was prejudicial, in that it excluded men from the work we were doing for an entire year. So I wanted to just say a word about the philosophy that undergirds that position. And we apply the same metric or rubric or series of thoughts to questions of race in our collecting and exhibition program too. So I think it's very fair to say that the BMA, like most institutions, a vast majority of institutions in this country, are historically male-centered and historically white-centered. And so it is our position that the way to remedy that imbalance, historical imbalance, is not by being fair in the present. That to be fair in the present would imply a fair history, which isn't true. So our position is, in order to remedy some of those historical biases, for instance, a collection that's 96% male, it is incumbent upon us to distort radically in the direction of those artists who have been ignored in the canon, have been ignored by institutions historically, in an effort to, in a short period of time, achieve a greater degree of balance within our institution. One way I think about that is through symmetry. So if it's true to say that female identifying artists are making some of the most important work today, if it's also true to say that we are an institution built by visionary female philanthropists and directors and curators, then it also stands to reason that our exhibition schedule should mirror that fact, and our collection in particular, those works we hold in trust, should over time reach a point of actual equity. But given the vast gulf between men and women in the collection, again, 96% to 4%, our position is that we need to perform a kind of radical distortion in the area of, in the direction of reparation, if we have any hope of telling a true and research-based art history that goes, that battles with the biases that have structured the way museums have narrated history over time. So, you know, it's notable too that our curatorial staff, I think we have 25 curators, and of them 24 are women. So that was not by design. It's you know, sort of a matter of recruiting the best people. So we have a natural predilection for this kind of work. And I'll just conclude by saying our efforts in the direction of reparation based on gender and based on race have commenced, but they don't have an end. So I think there was some finger pointing around 2020 and the idea that there would be one token year and then we would simply revert to a male-dominated program. And that's emphatically not the case. We're very mindful of the need to address historical imbalances, and we'll do so going forward, not just within the span of 1 year. So I think that's it for me from now. And thank you all for listening and looking forward to the Q&A portion.
Grazie mille, Christopher. Per cui dal 4%.
Thank you, Christopher. So from 4%, now we tend to the 50%.
Yeah, yeah. So that's the idea, of course, is to achieve actual equity in our collection and in our exhibition making. My sense is that I won't live long enough to see that, but we can certainly jumpstart the effort. And one thing I would just say is that, you know, there's a difference between the total number of objects in the collection and the percentage of those objects that we put on view. So I do think that we can achieve a more equitable representation of art history through what we choose to show. So that it's a much faster route to get to there than to correct the collection itself. So I think by the time this year is over, we'll be very close to a sort of 50-50 split in the galleries.
Per cui è anche importante, come diceva.
So it is also important, as you said before, the proactive role of the museum in this policy as an institution, as a museum institution, as you said before.
I think it's enormously important that we make bold decisions in order that other institutions might consider taking a similar course. So one thing the board always says, you know, in conversation with me, is we not only want to be doing the good work, we want to represent a replicable model. And we've seen some of that happen already. So for instance, we went through a deaccessioning effort in 2018 and sold 7 paintings that generated almost 20 million. And we distorted all of those resources towards artists of color and women. And sort of a year later, SF MoMA did the same thing, and the AGO in Toronto did the same thing. So I think it's also about a cascading effect.
Grazie, grazie mille, Christopher Bedford.
Thank you, Christopher.
Saluterei a questo punto, se introduco un'altra ospite.
I would like to introduce another guest to our roundtable, Mariella Mengozzi. She has another background, but museum marketing, museum management, and she is specialized in museum management, and she worked for Walt Disney, Lamborghini, and today she is the director of the National Museum of the Automotive in Turin. Good morning, and thank you for inviting me. I would like to ask you the classical question. What is for a woman to be the director of the Museum of Automotive? But as soon as I guessed this question, the risk was to ask something trivial. Do we still have to ask this question? Yes, Chiara, I think you are right. I'm proud and very happy to share this role with other women directors, president of other Museum of Automotive in Italy. We work together. We, are kind of a family. For example, Silvia is the owner of the collection, Elisabetta Cozzi of the Museum Fratelli Cozzi in Milan, and then Maria Bussolati, president of the Museum Mille Miglia. So this role is becoming more and more related to the women world. I have an experience, as you said, that is coming from the corporate world in the private market. My first experience was in fashion, which is very feminine, a very female sector, because usually it's the woman, leading the fashion industry, even if in different companies, the management was hosting many men in different profiles, but women were considered, but also in the design, which is a word, even if it was my first job, but the difference between men and women in the fashion and design world, I didn't perceive it. I didn't find any discrimination. And then I worked for Walt Disney, American multinational company, and of course, I had my professional growth. I became a manager. I worked hard, but no discrimination at all. When I moved from Walt Disney to Ferrari as a company, I had a different feeling, because even if Ferrari for sure is a state-of-the-art company, but the industry, because automotive is really male related, so to say, customers are usually men, the sales network usually made up by men, media journalists. Now we start seeing, for example, women journalists in the automotive field. But as for design, production, manufacture, is a very male word. I was a manager at that time, but in Ferrari, I perceived a little bit of this bias against the fact that I was a woman. I kept on working with great passion and enthusiasm. I was goal-oriented, and this was a will-win approach, even in Ferrari, because in the end, the company focused just on the result, because it's pretty competitive. So in the end, as soon as you've reached your goal, it was not a matter of being a woman or a man. So from this point of view, I had a positive experience. And I also became director of the museum, the Ferrari Museum in Maranello for 5 years. And then after this experience, I was appointed director of the Turin Automotive Museum. National Museum. So it's a public institution, and of course, it's a different experience compared to the Ferrari Museum. Now, our environment is much more a female environment, so to say. We have many women in the organization of this museum. But the Museo dell'Automobile, so the Automotive Museum, is still rich in women, in female role. You know, we are, I mean, our team is made up by 13 people, so we very little team, and this is the inner, so to say, the in-house organization, only 13 employees, and our 8 out of 13 are made up by women. And I like my team. They are all specialized and skilled and experienced. And even among the partners of the museum, and all the roles related to the management of our museum, we find many women working in it. So in this moment, I feel at ease in my role. I have never lived this experience as discriminated because I'm a woman. In the museum, we can find several witnesses of how women always worked and was always close to the development of automotive. We find, for example, women collectors or drivers or even technicians, engineers. So the woman roles, even manufacturing of automotive at the beginning of the 20th century is well represented. And car itself, I think, gave a lot to the female figure, not the female profile, because it meant feeling independent, it meant being free to move around, but also the process of industrialization led to the development of domestic appliances, household appliances, and the creation of objects which help the task of women in the family, within the households, trying to to mix and to ease the fact that you had to be a housewife and you have to work outside the family. So I would like to conclude by saying that the automotive field was born was created by men, and at the end of 19th century, the term automobile in Italian, so car, was was with the male gender. And then after 1926, Gabriele D'Annunzio, an Italian poet, an Italian writer, said that the term automobile had to be feminine. So he recognized in the car a set of characteristics. So he said, in my opinion, we should use the female article for automobile. And so I think that this automotive industry will soon become really filled with women, and this new trend of cars that is linked to comfort and linked to something practical, I think it can be perfectly matched with the Italian role. So D'Annunzio, we have to congratulate to what D'Annunzio did. Another hot topic for you, the topic of wages among executive roles. Is there a discrimination, an unbalanced situation between men and women about the wage? I, of course, refer to the private company world, and yes, there is a difference in the wage. And I, for example, can think about what Ferrari did. I worked 12 years in Ferrari, and I was the only woman executive manager for 8 years out of 12 years of my experience. And I know that there were differences even from the point of view of the salaries, of the wages. And then, of course, it's true that everyone can make its own decisions. But my experience was that there was uh, an inequality in the wages. And I would like also to ask the same question to Fatma, since you are in the top management, if you had the same problem at the museum level.
Non, non, pas du tout.
No.
Non, pas du tout. C'est les
No,
salaires
not at all. Not at all.
sexe.
I would say that the salary, I mean, the wages are the same for the two sexes, both men and women.
Allora di questo siamo felici. Grazie.
So we are happy about it. Yes, in the museum, of course, you have to be selected, and so the wage is another matter. I would like to thank our guests. And now I would like to give the floor to Danilo Ecker. I would like to remind Lea Vergine, after she passed away 1 month ago, art critics who in 1980 curated the exhibition L'altra metà dell'avanguardia in Milan, and she pointed out, she stressed, and she take out of the shadow some female artists. Lea Vergine passed away 1 month ago. I would like to pay homage to this woman. She didn't like the word feminist, but she said, I'm proactive in the female world, as she said. And she also wanted to remind the role of women in the arts of the 20th century. I would like to welcome Danilo Ecker, professor, art critic. He's teaching at the University in Bologna, in Rome, and he was director of many Italian museums, Trento, Bologna, Turin. And today he is a professor of philosophy of curatorship in Turin. So I would like to give the floor to Danilo, and then I have a kind of provocative question to him. Good afternoon. First of all, let me thank you for inviting me. I was curious and paid a lot of attention to the colleagues, I mean, to the speeches I've just heard, and I was eager to take new information about some museums that I also know very well, as the Hermitage or the Museo dell'Automobile, but I was happy to learn something new. Right now, I work as a professor, even if I directed several museums. So I am not here representing a museum, but I can, focus on the topic of today's event, stressing the gender inequalities and the gender gap, in particular in the artistic relationship between women or men artists. I would like to list some items. I would like to share with you some considerations. Something that is forgotten, in my opinion, as that is one of the principles upon which the writing, the feminist writing is coming from really right. A psychiatric of the half of the 20th century, and she wrote about energies, in particular based on the sexuality, or for example, her theory of orgasm. And she gave back the central role to women based on her theories. And then another artist that is usually neglected, Julie Chicago, her name was Judy Cohen. She was born in Chicago, and then her name was in the end Judy Chicago. And she developed a set of works based on the theory of orgasm. And so this situation, these moments launch an important consideration by uh, art critics, women art critics or philosophers. Lea Vergine, you just mentioned her before, a friend of mine, and I worked with her, and for sure she was one of the crucial roles in the female dynamics here in Italy. Carla Lonzi is another important role, the first art historian who worked on the relationship between art and feminism. Or Anne-Marie Suzot, even if she was French, she was a wife of Boetti, so she boosted, so to say, the cultural debate around the topic of feminism in art, in the art industry. Two American philosophers, Maura Lerley and Linda Nochlin. Linda Nochlin, she is famous because she wrote, how come we do not have a lot of very good female artists? Of course, this is just a provocation, a provocative question. So around this debate, we can understand, so the theoretical debate on the term feminism. So please excuse myself if I decide to use this term. It's pretty trivial, I know, but it's an afternoon conversation, so not an academic conversation. So that's why I use this term feminism. So, but the theories developed from the 60s to the 70s on this topic is crucial. So a very important and complex debate launching many artistic researches, very complex and articulated. If we consider the researches on women artists in the 60s and 70s, we can discover a research world so violent from an expression point of view, because it justifies this idea of a radical feminism. Vali Export, for example, on her work on genital package. So one of the works which were recognized even today as the symbol of feminism in art, or the dramatic works of Gina Pane to understand to which point the body can be seen, can be visible, can suffer, or the Guerrilla Girls, this American group of political feminist activists and artists, or traditional artists, so to say, like Tracy Heming or Nancy Sparrow. So this is a research group that developed a formal linguistic intensity that is extraordinary. And all this on the theoretical or aesthetical field was developed in the 60s, 70s, up to the end of the 80s. And the difficulty, in my opinion, and of course, I would like to share with you my opinion, but so it's just in a colloquial form, we could have a very long debate. But in my opinion, the difficulty in this gap is starting from the 80s, when we introduced the algebraic factor. So we have 10 men, we need to have 10 women. We have 5 men, we need to have 5 women. So everything was based on figures, on numbers. And this in a way, changed the situation, but it worsened the situation, because we have to focus on quality, not on quantity. So since you focus on quantity, then you neglect the quality aspect. So you neglect all the expression and other aspects. And today we see how most of the female artists today, in reality, they share the same language to their men colleagues. So there is an homologation of a linguistic process. I don't know if it's good or not. Maybe it's something good. But the fact that you have this homologation on the formal, at the formal level, because the goal, the final goal was, equity in numbers. So this diminished the power, the revolutionary power that was behind the feminism of the 60s and 70s in the art industry. It really created important revolutions, because there was a women word shouting, and using a new language, a new female language. And today, this this approach has been weakened. So how can we work at curatorial levels, at curatorship level in museums? I think one of the interesting experience, it was the director of the Biennale in 2015, because it was the first who gave visibility and an audience to the African art, but it also structured his Biennale exhibition based on the storytelling with the African point of view. And the goal, and I strongly believe in this curatorship, storytelling approach, because I think that curators do not only have to select artists, but also to create a storytelling so that you can convey new feelings, new emotions to the works we have to present, in order to give a new way of reading, even if you run the risk of competing with the artists themselves. But we must have this ability and this intellectual dimension, and to create through this an exhibition storytelling. Orwell, for example, focused on the African storytelling. I think that it will be interesting to understand if we have a female storytelling, which does not mean organizing a female exhibition in the trivial, sense. No, but considering artworks, archaeological artworks, classical artworks, historical artworks, with a female point of view, because we consider that the female point of view can have a different sensitivity, because the artwork never ends in a gaze, or by having a definition, but the ability, the mystery, the poetry of having millions of gazes and of possibilities to be able to create a storytelling project scheme, uh, matching a different point of view that can be even the female point of view. I think that this can be an interesting exercise, an interesting test or research field if you want to develop the curatorship dynamics that is not just the exhibition of artworks, and in particular, not just the counting of men artists and women artists. I display 5 men artworks, and so I have to have the same amount of female artworks. So thank you. Thank you, Professor. We have some questions from our audience. Can I ask this question? So one question is really interesting, and it goes back to what Professor Bedford said before, that you, touch upon in his speech. Elisa Billetti, the question is, good morning, I have a question. All policies targeting to rebalance men and women in the art industry are maybe running the risk of creating ghettos. This is what you said before, Professor Bedford, by, focusing on a higher number of women, saying that you are looking for a balance in order to avoid the opposite risk. So I would like to ask this question to Professor Ecker and to Professor Bedford, if you agree.
Sure. Should I go first? Okay. Yeah, I think that's a really astute point. So there is a risk in bundling like items and separating those like items apart from others. So in this case, men and women. I think the way we think about it at the museum is in terms of a two-step process. So the first step is a very long one. And again, I don't think I'll live to see step two. Step one, I think, involves this kind of radical distortion of attention in the present in recognition of historical imbalances. So if we've been biased and prejudiced for centuries, I don't believe that the way to address that in the present moment is through fairness or is through a fair 50-50 balance. I think you achieve equity based on real historical research and real art history way in the future by in the present being deliberately unfair, by privileging women in female identifying artists in recognition of the fact that those artists were written out of the canon deliberately historically. So that's our feeling. So certainly it's not a perfect process because it does have, as you put it, it can have a ghettoizing effect. But to me, it's the only suitable remedy for what's happened historically. And what's most important is step two, eventually. So step one, I think, is difficult. And I think it rubs some people the wrong way. And it's very long. And it can sometimes feel like an uphill battle because the numbers are so distorted in one direction. But I think that eventual step two, many years down the line, will prove the effectiveness of this process.
Grazie mille, direttore.
Thank you. Professor Ecker, you also mentioned this topic by saying that the mathematical, the algebra factor is useless, to calculate men and women. The risk of ghettoization when I create a boundary, any type of boundary I place and I define, even if this boundary is precious or an ambition, it is still a ghetto. So I believe that this is a mistake, a viewing mistake. So switching and shifting the attention from one aspect to another. So on what the female world can give to the artistic research, to the development of art. So in my opinion, this is the core around which we have to reflect, we have to think about. The fact that you consider that population majority made up of women for a statistical point of view. And so from a statistical point of view, there should be same amount of men of women in the art industry. So we are talking about statistics, and it was contradicted by history. History penalize this, but in all sectors, because this penalization, so to say, disadvantaged position of women is in many sectors. So in my view, we have to strengthen the theories of the 60s and 70s, when the contribution given by the creativity, by the study critics of women, and was crucial to develop the entire artistic pathway. So we have to go back to this point of view, to that point of view. This can help this balance. Thank you.
Professore. Vorrei leggere anche chiamando in causa Fatma.
I have another question for Fatma. Gianfranco Tuzzolino, teacher of Islam Architecture History at the University of Palermo, and he is writing, it's an interesting topic, and I think that women can play a crucial role in strengthening the museum network in the Mediterranean by therefore imagining a new perspective.
Yes, of course, I totally agree. And, you know, it's our idea with Patrizia and myself. We have the same idea that we had naturally. That is to say, we are in favor of this idea that we support, and we try to put it in practice concretely. Yes. I would like to come back to the topic of equality in wages, and this is everywhere in Tunisia since we became independent in 1955 with the first president. So women got many rights, and therefore, you see, the law, the Tunisian law, recognizes and states the equality in wages in the institutions, in the organizations, in the companies, I mean, everywhere.
Grazie mille. Fatma, vediamo se
Thank you, Fatma. Let's see if we have other questions. Otherwise, I would ask Patrizia. I was impressed by the quality of these speeches, and I take home, after this webinar, I take home more questions than answers, because it was extremely interesting, and, you know, and a global, an overall view. We have North, South, East, West, we have US, we have Russia, we have Tunisia, we have the North with Turin, with Danilo, because he comes from Trento, so a northern region. And then we have Florence as the central region of Italy. So we have an overall vision of the world linked to museum and arts. I think that we have COVID that is a huge presence, even if it's absent. I mean, we want to overcome this this difficult moment. We are aware that the post-COVID is like after Jesus Christ, you know, it's game-changing. It's something completely, you know, this complete change. And I like the idea of Christopher combining all the concept that we have just mentioned today of symmetry. Symmetry is an important, an interesting concept, because art is on one side symmetry, but thanks to its asymmetry, and like Danilo was saying before, when he talked about female feminist movements, who contributed in an asymmetric way to the art history, to curatorship, to the artistic movements. And on the other side, I find interesting that Christopher is talking about something that we have to force, we have to force the situation to fill the gaps and biases that are there. We cannot deny them. Even the question about the number, equal numbers. We know that equal numbers can create ghettos. We are aware of it, but I think they are necessary to find a balance and to find this gender balance. And it's a process, it's a pathway, and that is shared by all our speakers. Even Dimitri as well talked about projects involving not just the women in your teams. And you almost have the opposite problem. You have more women than men in your teams. Probably you read that the mayor of Paris, the woman mayor of Paris, was fined because most of the people of the municipal staff are women and men are in a minority, and for the French law there must be a perfect balance. And so Hidalgo said we have to unbalance to create a new balance, because the damnatio memoria which hit women must be rebalanced with greater presence, more numerous presence of women. So it's a common pathway, a common process at least in our panel, reflecting a diversified, situation and landscape. So we are leading towards a balance, and I'm happy about it. And COVID probably also helped us in rebalancing the situation. I do not want to give any recipes, so to say, but considerations, remarks, and the reflection of today are on the table. They are there, very interesting, and I think they represent the starting point of a new pathway of consideration and of actions as well. So myself as well, I will give a greater visibility to women to find a balance, even if I would like that to this process we find the men collaboration, because it's a need for humanity, for individuals, for people. Thank you, Patrizia. I would like to thank all our guests, our speakers, Professor Danilo Ecker, Director Christopher Bedford, Mariella Mengozzi, Dimitri OZERKOV, Fatma Nightil. I hope I pronounce it correctly. And to our Presidenta, so President woman, Patrizia Asproni, we created a new way of saying woman president, so in Italian, Presidenta. So I would like to conclude this streaming, this event. I think it was recorded, so you can also watch it later. And we hope we can maybe, meet each other soon. So thank you, and I hope to see you soon in presence. Thank you.